stream. Thank you very much for the Twitch Prime sub, dude. So, what was I saying? We're analyzing this game. Big thing, first of all, guys, is something you guys can all learn from as Zerg players. Check it out. Super early in this game, Sizzling Melon sees something very interesting. Check this out. Let's see when he scouts it. Doesn't actually scout this spine early. Let's see, when does he scout this? Has just run in here and he's gone, oh my god, you're walling off. So what does that tell us, guys? That tells us it is a gasless play. So what is a gasless play? A gasless play is where a Zerg player skips on the gas early on. He's taken them now. He's taken them a bit earlier than you're meant to. Nerfherd's a bit of an inefficient build from Nerfherder. But he's skipped on the gas, which means no Zergling speed. So he's only got slow Zerglings, which aren't an aggressive threat. They're really weak. And he's going to rely on a Walloff, Queens, Spines. Basically things which only cost minerals to defend, whilst powering up the economy and spilling out large numbers of drones. 90% of the time, this is going to go into Roaches and Queens. You see the Roach Warren double Evo, but Nerfherd, is being a bit of a tricky guy, is kind of faking Roaches and actually going Mutas behind it. But let's just focus on the fundamentals for now, before we get too excited. Thank you, Moist Nuggy, for the Twitch Prime sub. Is there anything sadder in this world than a moist nug? I don't even know. I don't think there is. So the thing is, what do you see? You see a player who cannot be aggressive. They're committing to a wall, potential upgrades, tech, no ling speed, static defense. So there's two ways to play against someone who commits to something like this, where they are very static and they can't threaten you. One is go completely all in, and the other is go completely greedy. And you need to push really hard in one direction or the other. And this is where most players fail to read their opponents and make that assumption, right? So let's take a look. How does Sizzling Melon react once spotting this? We've got a Baneling Nest already down. In hindsight, there's no use for a Baneling Nest unless we're going all in, right? Think about it, guys. You see a wall in, and you immediately know, wait a second. If I'm not going all in, he doesn't have Ling speed, what am I going to use Banelings for? So when he scouted that wall, Sizzling Melon could have cancelled the Baneling Nest. Or just keep massing Lings and go all in. Most people screw up their wall. Having a spine in the wall is actually really weak. You can kill that with 5 Banelings. Not the best wall off. But yeah, basically cancel the Baneling Nest and just hold down that drone key, right? But Sizzling Melon doesn't do that. Sizzling Melon actually commits to 14 Zerglings before scouting this. That's okay. That's not the end of the world. You can still go very economic. There's drones building. But right now, no Overlord. It's about to get supply blocked on 44. And starts going for Roaches. Not necessary. The opponent isn't going to have a lot of Roaches or Zerglings or anything out for a long time, especially after you see the second spine. That's where you really know they're just being defensive. So Sizzling Melon's trying to play the economic game. He's going, okay, let's get a lair, let's get the third gas. Looks like wants to play Roach play on 3 bases. So really should continue focusing on those drones. Now, is going for Overlord speed, and that I don't agree with. Now, the reason I don't agree with Overlord speed is there's just no need for it. Your lair's going to be finished at the same time Overlord speed is. You might as well just make one Overseer and Scout. That being said, is the 50 resource difference going to make a difference? Nah, not really. At least it'll give you scouting, but if you go for that upgrade, you really need to scout immediately. That upgrade's finished, but Sizzling Melon actually sent an Overlord all the way from his side of the map, which takes forever to scout. If he used one of the Overlords that was already there, Sizzling Melon would have seen this so fast and would have been like, oh, Spire. And would have had an extra 30 seconds repair. Instead, it's like, oh, Aspire! Ugh, blood pressure through the roof. Crap, I'm not prepared for this. And that's going to panic you a little bit, right? So let's see how Melon responds. There's going to go a Hydra Den, a ton of spores, a spine, another spine. Okay, you don't need spines to defend against Mutas. Tons of Overlords on the map, which is very risky. You should be pulling your Overlords off the map, or they can get killed by the Mutas. All these Overlords could have run to safety. And building a ton of Hydras and Ravagers. Okay, so Ravagers do not counter Mutalisks no matter what's happening, guys. You can waste your time spamming Corrosive Bile, but you are relying on your opponent basically being really dumb. If they get hit by Corrosive Bile, they've made a massive screw up. It happens to me once in a blue moon where I'm so lazy with watching my Mutas, I'll lose 1 or 2 to Corrosive Bile, but even then it's not worth the investment in the Ravagers. So what's happened here is Sizzling Melon's reaction to the Mutas is a little bit unrefined in my opinion. Going for Hydras is all well and good, but where are the Hydra upgrades? Hasn't got a single Hydra upgrade right now. These Hydras suck without the upgrades. Sizzling Melon seems to be wanting to do a push. But let's think about this in terms of the fundamentals. where's your economy versus army investment, and where is your opponent's army versus economy investment. So guys, think about what we've seen in this game. We saw nerf Herder tech up on 2 bases and rush to Mutalisks. So only committing to 2 bases of economy and then Mutas, maybe Zerglings, maybe Roaches as well, but it's basically 2 base, army, and tech, right? On the other hand, you've got Sizzling Melon. What's Sizzling Melon done this game? Sizzling Melon has gone 3 bases, economy, has now invested in Spore Crawlers, all this defense everywhere, and yet is immediately pushing into the opponent who's been massing units off 2 base. Why do we know they were massing units off 2 base? Because we saw there was no 3rd base down for the longest time. There was nowhere to send drones to. So Sizzling Melon should know that numbers-wise, this is not a good time to attack, because you effectively should have, at best, an equal army to your opponent. And yet Sizzling Melon's pushing without the important Hydra upgrades, with a huge investment in Spore Crawlers, which it turns out wasn't even necessary, because the Mutas are running home, because they're afraid of the Hydras. So wait a second, Sizzling Melon didn't need these Spore Crawlers? What are these spines for? What are these drones doing? I don't know. And there's a double Evo chamber, but we're not using that. The ideal response here from Sizzling Melon would have been to say, I don't need Hydras. Let's just connect my bases with creep. I like the number of spores, I don't like the placement. Spore there is good. Put a spore there. Spore there. Spore there. Spore there. Spore there. Just connect your bases with spores. If they come in and hit an extractor, it's not the end of the world. You don't need 2 spores per mineral line. It's a little bit too much expenditure, and the problem is there's still all these weak points between your rally points where Mutas can fly in and pick off units that are popping out, right? So not only that, but if you're going to go Hydras, you've got to get the Hydra upgrades. And why not drone your 3rd? This was Sizzling Melon's advantage. And this is something you guys can apply, especially Zerg players, but to some extent every race has this. Whenever you scout air tech, you should have a very organized response. Remember guys, this was scouted ages earlier, and Sizzling Melon could have been so far ahead. Sizzling Melon scouted this about like, what, 540 or something like that. Okay, so you scout this as Sizzling Melon, you come in here, what is the first thing you should do? Okay, that's almost finished. I've probably only got about 40 seconds, maybe 50 at most till Mutas are in my base. Building spores straight away is okay. But what's more important is spores cost minerals. Spores cost drones, which is even less drones mining minerals. So rather than focusing on that immediate response of let's get Hydras, let's get a ton of spores, focus on making up for the fact that you're dumping a ton of your economy into that response. How do you make up for that? You actually should hold down the drone key at this point in the game. People think about air coming their way, and the first thing they think of is, crap, I gotta build spores, I gotta build Hydras. But what you should actually always be thinking of, no matter what matchup you're playing, is I've gotta build spores, I've gotta build Hydras, that's a ton of money. Well, this is gonna cut into my income really bad, all these drones going into buildings. So you should actually be building 20 drones as quickly as possible, and you should be trying to pump that out. If you can get this 3rd mineral line saturated, putting these spores down isn't such a big deal, but Sizzling Melon never benefits off the 3rd base this whole time. If Sizzling Melon saturated the 3rd, didn't get the spines, just got those spores like I was talking about, went for 2-2 upgrades, Hydra upgrades, and did a 2-2 Roach Hydra push off 3 base economy, we would be looking at roughly a maybe 10-minute timing attack? About 10 minutes. Maybe 10 minutes 30 from Sizzling Melon, maxed out with 2-2 Roach Hydra. Up against a nerf herder whose economy is pretty trash, whose Mutas don't find any damage. But instead, these Ravages are not useful at all against Lingbane, and just generally this army, the Hydras don't have the upgrades, it's all clumped up, the Lingbane Muta comes in, overwhelms the very feeble anti-air, and suddenly you've thrown away a massively expensive army. The amount of gas spent on those Ravages, oh no, it's monstrous. And if your opponent's ever massing Lingbane Mutas, and you're really afraid of those Banelings connecting, sometimes you can overwhelm it with Roach Hydra. You've got to spread your Hydras kind of like Marines, have your Roaches in front like the Marauders, and pretend you're a Terran playing TvZ. But the other thing you can do is add in Infestors, and if you fungal growth the Mutas or the Banelings, you just win the game really easily. Still no Hydralisk upgrades. Oh no! I don't know if Sizzling Melon's just never built Hydras before, it's a new unit for him, or it's just a mental blank. Sometimes you forget these things. Those drones sitting there all game as well, a little bit of a pain. So let's just watch the next fight, see how this one finishes, but I imagine it's just going to be a ton of speed Banelings rolling into Hydras and Mutas cleaning the rest up. So, that's actually not that many Banelings, to be honest. That is a ton of Mutas. There's like as many Mutas as there are Hydras. Remember I was talking about a 10 minute 30 maxed out Hydra push? 140 supply at 11:30, a minute after that. And now making a ton of Lurkers. Lurkers are good versus Banelings, but Sizzling Melon didn't have enough Hydras to even beat the... Oh, actually, with 2-2 upgrades finishing, you can actually... Your Hydras do really well versus Mutas. So I guess if the Lurkers are actually burrowed in a good enough position, he can win this. Let's see how he does it. Oh, no! So didn't send any scouts ahead. I would have split roaches ahead to try to see what's going on. I would have brought an overseer as well to clear creep. And I would have been trying to pre-spread those hydras as I go and kind of keep them with or behind the lurkers. But getting the hydras separated from the lurkers, oh, so unfortunate. And the mutas just come in and clean up the rest. GG's. But yeah, lurkers wreck banelings. You've just got to be very careful to make sure they're burrowed and you're not surprised by the banelings jumping on top of you. GG, that was a good one. That was really interesting. GGG.